Coming up, joining me on this week's video is sociologist Simon Godziek. Simon's sociological take on British politics I thought would be of interest to Truth to Power viewers, and I've got a couple of questions that I'd like to put to Simon, and hopefully, like me, you'll be very interested in his answers. Simon, one of the questions I often get asked by viewers of the Truth to Power channel is whether it really makes a difference what we vote for. In other words, the Labour Party under Starmer is sort of like a Tory light party, that rather than offering an alternative, it's basically a lighter version of the Tory party. What would your message as a sociologist be to people out there that are wondering whether it's worth voting at the next election?
Rob, it's a good question. One that's often asked is, actually, there any point in voting? Are they all the same? Is a right-wing Labour Party pretty much the same as the Tory Party? I'd say this, don't let the good be the enemy of the best. Now, a lot of people, perhaps a lot of your Truth to Power viewers, are not particularly great fans of the Blair years. And yes, Blair has got a lot to answer for example, in unnecessary wars. But it has to be said that he created more apprenticeships, I think, than the Tories have ever created.
Yes, yeah.
He instituted in his government the Sure Start programme, which the Tories have been very keen to destroy, and which has been shown repeatedly by reputed academic studies to do the world of good for children's early years.
Like you, I think my politics were closer to Jeremy Corbyn than they ever were to Tony Blair's. But somebody said to me the other day, what's Tony Blair's legacy other than the war in Iraq? And I would say record levels of homelessness, lowest they've been since before the Second World War, and also the lowest levels of child poverty in history.
Absolutely.
So,
where child poverty is now.
Yeah.
I think what we have to consider is that we can witness a cycle in British politics between Conservative and Labour administrations. The Conservatives, when in power, I'm not going to say deliberately, but for whatever reason, they will underfund the health service and education. Labour governments come in and they just pour money into them, get them not to where they should be, but into a much better position, and then the Tories come in again and cut everything.
Like the American Republicans, they seem to be increasingly becoming the party of small government. Would you agree with that?
The idea that government should be responsible, the state should be responsible for next to nothing. There was a Victorian whose name, of course, escapes me, who said that basically maintaining public works is about the level and the extent of the role of government. My personal view is it literally the polar opposite. I don't think the state could ever be big enough. I would be very happy for the state to be all-encompassing, but that's because I'm a collectivist.
Right.
Whereas, and yes, today's Tory party...
it's about the opposite of that.
Well, you see, exactly the opposite of that. But, of course, COVID has forced their hand. And the state is an awful lot bigger today than I think most of the Tory party would like it to be. Certainly the wing that we...
The libertarian wing.
The libertarian wing, yep. I mean, I know you've mentioned on your channel the book written by Truss.
Britannia Unchained, Truss and all the rest of them, yes.
I think, if I'm right, I don't know this book inside out, but I believe that it propounds or makes an argument for a small state.
Yes,
when it's not saying that British workers are lazy.
Right, the idlest in the world, I think, to use her expression, yes. Tell us, Simon, you say you're a collectivist. Explain to me exactly what you mean by that. Are you some kind of Marxist?
I probably am.
Yes. yeah. How does that relate to Jeremy Corbyn and your views on him?
But as far as I'm concerned, Jeremy Corbyn simply isn't a socialist.
Really? Okay.
Not a socialist.
What do you mean by that?
Right. Socialism, and this does link back to collectivism, socialism has the collective as the key unit of society because the collective is society. They are one and the same.
Right.
Jeremy Corbyn has liberal tendencies,
right,
within which it is the individual who is the key unit.
Right.
Those two are in complete conflict.
So you're saying that Corbyn is a liberal socialist, but as a collectivist you're an illiberal socialist?
I am an illiberal socialist. I think
right.
Socialism, almost by definition, is authoritarian.
Right.
Because One backward step. If we look for a definition of socialism in a standard dictionary, Oxford, Chambers, not a dictionary of political thought, it's quite likely that there will be some reference, if you look for a definition of socialism, it's going to say the public ownership of the means of production, distribution and exchange. Yeah. That simply means, put simply, nationalise everything.
Right.
Everything.
Yeah.
And you begin with the land and the banks, if you've got any sense at all.
Okay.
Now, the people who have a lot to lose, by which I mean the capitalist class, they are not simply going to say, oh yeah, okay, we'll go along with that. Right. Therefore, there has to be an authoritarian element to enable that to happen. Yeah. Now, which isn't to say that the population people should be repressed, even the capitalist class, because what's wrong with Putin's Russia, Stalin's Soviet Union, is that the people were repressed. And if socialism is about anything, it's about euthenics, the science of the improvement of living conditions. It should be about basically making people happier.
Right, but you're not really making the bankers and the landowners happier.
Well, ultimately they will be. It's just they don't know it.
They don't know it because
there's
some sort of false consciousness.
Well, it's the phrase that people reach for. He used the term ideology to refer to this almost superstructural exercise of power by the ruling class, which could influence how people formed their opinions who are not in that class. People will and have and do vote against their material interests.
Yeah. Are you thinking the tabloids have got a big role in that, and the right-wing media?
Absolutely. I think that's
one of the tools. Yeah.
Because I think then we have to look at who owns those.
Yeah, of course, yeah. I mean, down here in Brexit land, in this very Tory stronghold of the southwest, if I tell somebody that I'm a regular Guardian reader, I do read the Guardian alongside the Independent, the New York Times, and many others, but I'm identified as a Guardian reader as though that's some sort of insult. But I look at the Guardian's owned by several thousand small shareholders who have got no editorial influence whatsoever, and the people that are sort of ripping the fun out of me are reading a tabloid title owned by an oligarch with their own agenda.
Absolutely.
And yet it's me that's being made fun of. I don't understand.
But, I mean, this is hard because what's the alternative? Do we want state-owned press? Do we really want that? Do we want... I don't think we do either. But then, as long as we allow individuals and oligarchs in one form or another, plutocrats, to own the means of production, distribution, and exchange of media, and therefore of thoughts, then what are we going to end up with? We're going to end up with people who read a newspaper, or they might listen to a radio channel or GB News, bless them.
GBBs,
and they will form a set of opinions, but they may not represent their best material interests or promote their material interests. I mean, truthfully, I trace a lot of what's very badly wrong back to Thatcher. The individualism I'm referring to, she greed is good.
There's no such thing as society.
Exactly. Now, the idea that she won 4 elections, was it?
I think it was 4.
4 elections.
Yeah.
It baffled me at the time until I sat down and thought about it, and the people who voted for Thatcher often, and again, this is not meant to be patronising. The last thing I want to do is belittle or demean those people. But I am going to suggest that in voting for Thatcher, they did not at best promote their own material interests.
The working class Tory is quite a phenomenon.
Yes, it is. I mean, and even more so today, actually, with the so-called Red Wall.
Yes.
But then again, a lot of that, I think, is to do with the fact that Corbyn wasn't interested. In
and also Brexit, let's be fair.
And
as well.
Brexit, most definitely.
They all saw Johnson as the man to get Brexit done. And here we are a couple of years later, and Brexit is still not done, with some of the regulations still delayed till later this year.
Northern Ireland Protocol.
And the Northern Ireland Protocol, exactly. So another comment I get, probably from either parody accounts or Russian troll accounts, I'm not sure, but they come onto the channel and they say, we can't take any Ukrainians from the war because Britain is already full up.
Really?
Look after your own first. To which my answer is usually, but they're not looking after their own, this government. They don't look after the veterans, the ex-military people that are down
elderly
on their
people, children.
Yeah.
Lone parents,
Yeah. So
people with mental health problems.
Exactly. Don't tell me to look after our own first before the refugees. I mean, you can look after both, and this government are looking after neither.
It's laughable. It's laughable.
Well, I mean, we're short of. I mean, they say that there isn't any room, but I mean, if you go up in I took a flying lesson a couple of years ago. You look down at the landscape. There's plenty of room, believe me. But I think what they're talking about is lack of spaces at schools, hospitals, and so on.
Okay.
But we have labour shortages in this country in certain jobs. So, what would your answer be to these people that say that the drawbridge is up?
I don't like it. I don't agree with it. It's factually inaccurate for any number of reasons. The idea that we're full. I come from Suffolk, and if you get a train through Suffolk, then you look around and there are virtually no buildings.
Yeah.
The population density of the UK is not great, not high.
No.
We've plenty of room for plenty of people, Ukrainian people or not Ukrainian people, people in need.
Yeah.
And I am the son of an immigrant,
Yeah.
a form of refugee, a Pole who came to this country immediately after the Second World War.
Yeah.
And Britain in those days did pretty well in this regard. Now, it's fair to say that if there is to be an increase in population, then there needs to be an increase in infrastructure and services.
Yes. It's a supply and demand thing, isn't it? And people don't realise that, but they always look at the demand pool as though, well, we haven't got the supply. But of course, a lot of the people wanting to come into this country are looking to work. They tend to be professional people with a bit of get up and go, which has got them here. These are the very people that are going to be supplying the education, the healthcare, and all the rest of it.
And this is not an insurmountable problem. It's in a sense, like you say, I don't want to say it's a problem that solves itself, but the people who come here, almost all come here to work, to have an opportunity for a life better than the one. Certainly in the case of Ukraine.
Right.
And obviously a lot of people who come from Ukraine don't want to go back to Ukraine.
Simon's father, as he mentioned, was a Polish, can we say refugee after the Second World War? I mean, he was certainly escaping from the communist.
He was. The trouble was that he'd just spent 5 years of his life fighting one dictator.
Yes.
He was not going to run into the arms of Stalin in his home country.
Now, interesting enough, Simon's father came to the UK and married an English woman called Phyllis. And my wife is the daughter of a Polish man that came straight after the Second World War and married an English woman called Phyllis. So Simon and I have something in common there. But Simon has another very personal story. I don't know if you want to share this with us, Simon.
Happy to.
But at this advanced age, as you can see, he's quite an old git. He, for the first time in his life, I think, fell in love in his mid-50s to a Nepalese lady. And they were married in Thailand 4 years ago.
4 years ago.
And in Priti Patel's Britain, they're basically being held apart. Do you want to tell us a bit more about that, Simon?
No, of course. Rob, unless we can find £62,500 and keep it sitting in a bank account for 6 months, we can't go a pound below that, or I have an income at a certain, a paid job income at a certain level.
Yeah.
My wife cannot live in this country as permanently.
Right.
She can't get a spousal visa. Now, your viewers may think, well, that's not much. That's not. But why should it not be the case that as my wife, she's not able to live here automatically by right, as I am in her country? Yeah. I have a Nepalese spousal visa.
Yeah.
They said, welcome,
yes.
Come and go as you please.
So, and how long can you stay in Nepal?
For the rest of my life, if I want
to. So you don't
to.
need to leave to break up your residency?
I never do.
Whereas I know from our interactions that when your wife comes to the UK, she comes on a what sort of visa?
Basically a tourist visa.
A tourist visa,
yes,
which lasts for what, 90 days? Or
it lasts for 6 months.
6 months, okay.
But she can't stay here more than 6 months in any one year.
Yeah. So you basically have, unless you go to Kathmandu, you're forced to.
We are by definition parted. Now, there is an argument to say that my right to family life is being breached, but whereas there are lawyers who would take up a case, this gets clogged up in courts.
Yes, of course. It could take years.
It could take years. Yeah. And for the length of time while that case is being heard or tried or waited for, we remain in that same position.
Yeah.
And it just seems like, frankly, a wasted effort, even to try to do that. And that, of course, is perhaps part of the thinking, is a deterrent effect.
As a sociologist, what's your view on Priti Patel? How would you sum up your views?
Dear. She plays to a certain wing of the Tory party.
Yeah.
Now, the beliefs that she enacts, the legislation, the policies that flow from what she says and what she does are maybe something that she holds dear in her heart. They are certainly policies that are well received in certain sections of the media.
Amongst her base as well.
Her base, exactly.
Yeah.
What I think they are, and this is more a value judgment than a sociological one, is they're callous. Yeah. Sociologically, she's promoting a vision of a country that is actually quite authoritarian.
Yeah.
And this doesn't fit in with the more libertarian wing of her party to some degree. I mean, the thing with libertarians is libertarians fine providing it's my libertarianism.
Yeah, that's right. Yes.
The freedoms of other people are often less well thought of or regarded.
And the trouble is that this has to be surely a limit to freedoms, because your freedom is my repression. You have freedom to repress me, then where's the end? Another pertinent question, Simon, in terms of people's reaction to the Ukraine situation. A lot of people say, well, I say a lot of people, some on the far left and some on the right, are saying that the problem is NATO calls this war by expanding and accepting Russia's neighbours like Poland into NATO, and that they've been poking the bear with a stick.
It continues to astonish me that anyone who says that they're on the left or the far left should be supportive of Putin's Russia.
Yes, because there's nothing left-wing about Putin's Russia at all.
It's the capitalist Wild West, isn't it?
It is the capitalist
How
Wild
have
West,
these oligarchs made their money?
Yeah.
Except by stealing it from...
Yes.
I mean, in the Marxist sense, they're extracting the value from the population, and it's classical capitalism.
Classical capitalism.
In the minds of these people, the USA is worse.
Yeah.
In a number of regards, qualitatively, than Russia, then they will side with Russia, come what may, regardless. I would like to ask those people if they fancy being gay in Putin's Russia, as an example, or trans. I would also suggest that if Ukraine is a sovereign country, which it is, it can join any organisation actually it wants to.
Yeah, it's this sort of Cold War idea that the West and Russia have certain spheres of influence. Yeah. And there is this sort of old-fashioned view, to which I'm sure Putin subscribes, that Ukraine is somehow within the Russian sphere of influence. And he feels that he has rights to that territory that overrides the sovereignty of that sort of sovereign nation. Yeah.
But this is not that dissimilar to the Nazis' idea of their Aryan land, of Lebensraum,
of Slavic lands in this case.
Exactly. Sort of.
Yeah.
Or Russo lands that, and it's just we're in the 21st century.
Yeah.
Now, NATO ought not to threaten Russia. It ought not to.
No, of course.
But technically, NATO is a defensive organisation.
Yes.
Now, a lot of people are going to jump up and down.
I know, exactly. But they are meant to be. But
they are meant to be. They're not. Yes. I mean, I'm not a great fan of NATO, but I'd much rather have NATO against Putin. And I'd much rather have the USA over Russia,
despite
Putin's
all
Russia,
its flaws.
It's a terribly flawed thing. I mean, but in the end, if there is, you don't have to choose one over the other. You can dislike them both,
Right.
but one more than the other.
Right. So my thanks to Simon Godziek for giving us his sociological perspective on some of the big political news stories of the day. And if you enjoyed this video, then please remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell for notifications of new videos every Saturday. Next week I'm meeting again with YouTube's Mr. Brexit, Michael Lambert, for our latest collaboration, and I hope you'll join us then.